some connections between, this idea of planet Earth having some feminine resemblance. All right, so, and I think this is also important to notice, like, okay, so in ancient Greek, they thought that Earth also had these notions of being beautiful. We can see it through Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle, how they valued nature, and they had these associations between, woman and planet Earth. But at the same time, for example, Aristotle, he was one of the main defenders of having this separation that we're looking into right now. So for him, some people weren't allowed to actually even participate in politics, not even own land or inherit some other lands, right? And ever since these times, we can find already these connections between the supposed role of women under a society. So I thought that was also interesting. But now I want you to think about this quote that I was looking into a little bit earlier. It says, think of the very language we use to talk about the world around us. We have a fertile land. So maybe that was another one that we didn't really thought before. But when we think about planet Earth, another important element is we say, our land is fertile. That means that we can, reproduce more food for us, just as some people kind of associate those things with a woman, fertility. Also thinking about blooming, about being sweet, about being beautiful. But most importantly, we expect nature to reproduce. And also associate here, for example, the notion that we talked before about the overshoot, the idea that our planet Earth continuously through each year produces the natural resources that we need. So we do expect nature to reproduce itself so that we can nurture ourselves and keep on growing. So the question that we find at the end, I think is the important one that we're going to be unveiling a little bit further today. Isn't this a language we also associate to women? Now, what I want you guys to also kind of understand is the following. If we analyze art, we can see how we associate all of these comparisons, categories, metaphors, and so forth. That is, this particular activity of associating certain images and making connections between roles, gender roles, men, women, etc. Well, this is what some might call is an unconscious imagery that's working, that is continuously working and regulate inner relationships in a society. And that's why it's important to keep on even questioning ourselves about how is it that we think of the matters that are just to us and what's not, and how do we actually produce these notions. So, for example, I was looking through this book by Thomas Piketty, The Capital in the 21st Century, and I was surprised by how he associated this idea of inequality being, shaped by economical, social, and political actors. But this way that is shaped, it's also part of a cultural production that we're going to be looking in art, and also you can think of it as in movies. We're going to be talking actually about one of the most recent movies that we have from DC. Now, let's go through first this one. All right, so I apologize for having some of these quotes in Spanish, but I thought they were really important for us not to look into it. So in this slide, which I got from this book, Repensar las Desigualdades, I think you can still find it in Gandhi. It's actually a really interesting book because it looks at different inequalities and maybe having a different gaze into it. So one of the chapters that is looking at how do we construct these inequalities through symbols Well, they argue that, it is through these symbols that human beings not only establish difference and barriers in a continuous reality, but they also do the opposite, which is, affirm every continuity and affinity in realities that in any other way, there may be unequal, discontinuous, and fragmented. So basically what that means is that we use as culture symbol to determine what should be, what shouldn't be, what should keep on being, and maybe what shouldn't keep on being. And now I want you to, I would like to ask you guys, what do you think is a symbol? Whenever you hear about this word, what do you associate with it? What is a symbol for you guys? A purpose, meaning, drawing. A drawing can be a symbol. Totally. Something that represents. Perfect. Anybody else here, guys? What do you think when you hear the word symbol? I think it's something that has a meaning beyond its purpose. Something that has a meaning beyond its purpose. I see a top. I think about. Okay. I see it with another meaning that is not its purpose. That's a really interesting development. There's a whole, area of study that dedicates itself with meaning and meaning production, and there are some linguists that really work into it, and it's really fascinating. Like, for example, Saussure might be one of them, but Pierce and a U.S. Linguist, he was really connecting the ideas that you were just working on. I think that's really interesting. But if we kind of go to the basics, which I think you did cover it, which is how certain objects represent something, and whether that something else can be the same for everybody. Well, that's debatable. But maybe we can talk about how is it that through cultural productions we can make people see some symbols within a framework. Or, for example, when we talk about a movie and we see, for example, the word justice or vengeance, and then you see, for example, Batman, what kind of associations do you make between these words and their history and what you're actually looking into? All right, so I want you guys to have this idea of a representation that stands for something else. And this can be a drawing, this can be, just some random scribbles or whatever, some images representing something else. All right, I think we can go beyond this one. And okay, I think this is another interesting one. However, I would like to know if you guys have seen Tarzan, for example. Everybody here has seen it? Okay, there's someone that says no, but it seems that most of you, right, said yes. All right. Can you think, why am I asking this? Do you have any idea? What kind of connections can you make between Tarzan, climate change, feminism? All right, don't worry. So the first thing that I want you to see is, for example, how are some roles and how are some of these characters can be used to represent something else than itself. So, for example, Kala, we know that she is the one that Tarzan calls mother because she helped him grow. And I was looking at some kind of interpretations about some feminist interpretations of Tarzan, and I found this quote to be really interesting. It says, like 99% of mother figures in Tarzan's mother figures in film, Tarzan's mother Kala is reduced only that aspect of her character role as a mother. This again is a problem because it's so prevalent in all movies, and in most you will notice that the relationship of the mother-child usually takes a backseat to the father-child relationship. And I think that an important aspect of this quote is the last part. The mother-child relationship might be precarious, but she is always there for the child. It is always the father's respect, love, admiration, etc., that must be earned for the child. And now try to think about Kala. Instead of Kala, try to see Mother Nature there, and try to read the same quote, but thinking about Mother Nature. Mother Nature relationship towards us might be precarious, climate change, all of these disasters, but she is always there for the child. It is always the father's respect, love, admiration that must be earned by its society. So I want you guys to now see this aspect. This mother-son relationship might be precarious, but she is always gonna be there. And this is what we were talking just briefly about. How can we even translate this and move it towards our notions of climate change? And but also, I really found fascinating making this connection that this is one of the arguments that I usually read from climate change deniers. They are like, creating arguments like, this is just a natural aspect of our planet Earth, but we know that it's gonna return to some stability and we're gonna continue, to develop like we have always been because nature forgive us, because we're gonna do right by, creating this technology and so forth. But they don't really understand the whole aspect of planet Earth. Just as we were talking before, sure, planet Earth, we can find beauty in it, but we can also find some things that make us, feel some kind of grossness, and we'll look through some of it later on. But it's important that you guys start making these connections between these relationships and how are they working under our own unconscious imagery, because it is in these connections that are really closely tied to how can we deny the fact that climate change is created by us. And at the same time, I wanted now maybe to keep on pushing a little bit some of these comparisons, and how are they, part of this devaluation, reinforcement of stereotypes, and also now try to see what else does nature provides us with. So we see that nature has landscapes. We already talked about it, but we also see that there is biodiversity within it, and sometimes we even compare or associate, for example, women with certain animals. And when we think about, for example, Catwoman, have we ever seen some men cat, in our whole cultural production? For example, you think about Catwoman and you immediately think about Batman. But has there been some men under, the disguise of a cat? Not really, right? Why is it? Why is it that we are able to associate women with a cat, but not men with it? Well, according to this article that I was reading, they argue that first, whenever we think about cats, we associate, the feline, the sensual, the slinky, and they're often even thought as mysterious, alluring creatures. So I think that particularly, for example, in regarding Catwoman, it is they kind of have to create this sensual image of a woman disguised as a cat. And maybe that is the connection that Hollywood at the beginning, started developing, and they also connected with the idea of being mysterious. However, you can see that it's also more connected to the idea of a sexualization, of a sexualized woman. But when we think about men, now think about the other aspect or the other character in this DC universe. So we see Batman, right? And we know that his struggle is that of one who is looking for justice, and he's looking for rightfulness. He's trying to make things right, unlike women, who in this case, we can see that maybe they're only portrayed as thinking something that is really connected to sexualization and some other aspects. And just to have, this notion clear, ennoble means to make something better so that people admire it, him or her, or more, or her more. And in this case, I wanted now to focus a little bit, for example, on the story of Batman. So I'm gonna play the trailer. If you guys haven't seen the movie, don't worry, it's just a trailer, so there's no spoilers here. I haven't seen the movie either, so we're all connected.
Fear is a tool. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning. I've been trying to reach you. Find the gun! This is a powder keg, and Ritter's the match.
I can take care of myself.
If this continues, it won't be long before you've nothing left.
I don't care what happens to me.
It's only gonna get worse for you.
Whoa, take it easy, sweetheart. Hear everything they say, ain't you?
Maybe we're not so different. Who are you under there?
I'm vengeance. What's black and blue and dead all over? You. Dick.
I got you! I got you!
All right, so has anyone seen the movie yet? Nobody has seen it. You did? How was it? You like it? It could be better. All right, how about everyone online? Have you all seen it? You were waiting for more. All right. Well, yeah, that's what I've read, that they kind of liked, well, the people that I know like the movie, but let's see what else. So what I wanted to connect it, within our topic is, just some kind of a remembrance of how is Batman's narrative constructed. So if you remember, his story is that of grief. He's continually reminding himself or by others that the actions that he is doing at the present are always leading him to be isolated, for some reason. But at the same time, he's dealing with the burdens of the past, with the sins of his father, and some other elements, such as his mother and father's death. And now think about this image, which I think was one of the those quotes that I saw circulating a lot when we saw the trailer. I am vengeance. And when I read them through our social networks, what struck me a lot was how do we think about this idea of vengeance. So when you hear someone else talking about vengeance, you kind of try to calm them, try to bring them to a rational mentality, try to talk to them in such a way that whatever they're thinking of doing, they actually don't, right? But in this case, and on Batman's story, it appears that vengeance is that strife, that fire that keeps pushing him towards justice, and that's what fascinates me. How is it that in this movie and in past movies they are connecting the idea of vengeance and justice, and we can see it, for example, through the scenes of how he lost his parents, and for example this one, which was seen at the end. I think this is yeah, this is the did you guys watch Joker with Joaquin Phoenix? Do you like him? All right, so then I think most of you then remember this last scene.
You get what you fucking deserve. No, pal.
And just like the reason why I'm just displaying these scenes is because I want to ask you, why do you think Bruce's parents' death is essential to Batman's story? Why did you guys think it's such an important part of his construction as a character? All right, so there's some kind of a connection between trying to make things right after this happened. What else do you guys think? Because when you as a writer are coming up with a story and you create these scenes, it's because you are already envisioning a character of having certain values, having these motivations to keep on living and maybe acting in such a special way. So let's see what other answers do we find. So we're reading courage. What else? I think courage is an important one too, at least in this case. To seem lonely, revenge, just like he said, right? I am revenge, backstory. Backstory that makes him want to help others. All right, I like that one. Passionate, interesting. Oh, I like this one because whenever you look into how he wanted to protect other people from not having the same experience. I think he afterwards he constructed an orphanage where actually that's where he found Robin, if I'm not mistaken, or one of the Robins. To have some grief, to fight for something, all right, to give him purpose. All right, so I think these are some interesting answers. And the other thing that I think we have to connect also is the idea that within this justice, one can think of justice in several lenses, you know, for example, through the legal system. In his case, for example, when you were writing about helping others not going through the same story, his construction of an orphanage. But I think that we also need to look at Batman's actions particularly closely. And I think this is something that keeps on happening through each of the movies. And I don't know if you guys saw this movie, this Batman's movie. All right. So did you like Heath Ledger's act? Was he good? Was he any good as a Joker? All right. So let's remember
Starting out with any new project management.
a little bit this in, because I think we can encapsulate what I want us to think about.
The good cop, bad cop routine.
Not exactly.
Never start with the head. The victim gets all fuzzy. He can't feel the neck. See?
You wanted me. Here I am.
I wanted to see what you'd do. And you didn't disappoint. You let 5 people die. Then you let Dent take your place. Even to a guy like me, that's cold.
Where's Dent?
Those mob fools want you gone so they can get back to the way things were. But I know the truth. There's no going back. You've changed things. Forever.
And why do you want to kill me?
I don't want to kill you. What would I do without you? Go back to ripping off mob dealers? No. No, you complete me.
You're garbage. Who kills for money?
Don't talk like one of them. You're not. Even if you'd like to be. To them, you're just a freak. Like me. They need you right now. When they don't, they'll cast you out. Like a leper. See, their morals, their code. It's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
Where's Dent?
I have all these rules, and you think they'll save you.
Who's in control? I have one rule.
Oh, then that's the rule you'll have to break to know the truth.
Which is?
The only sensible way to live in this world is without rules. And tonight, you're gonna break your one rule.
I'm considering it.
No, there's only minutes left, so you're gonna have to play my little game if you want to save one of them.
Yeah.
You know, for a while there, I thought you really were, Dent. The way you threw yourself after her. Look at you go! Does Harvey know about you and his little bunny?
Where are they?
Killing is making a choice.
Where are they?
Choose between one life or the other. Your friend, the district attorney, or his blushing bride to be. You have nothing to threaten me with. Nothing to do with all your strength. Don't worry, I'm gonna tell you where they are. Both of them. And that's the point. You'll have to choose. He's at 250 52nd Street, and she's on Avenue X. That's just a
Which one you going after? Rachel.
All right. So any one of you remember this scene? This scene? I think this scene is one of the really interesting ones if we want to look into Batman psychology, because the Joker has always been constructed of this kind of complementary image of Batman, and he actually said it, right? He said, "You complete me." The idea of him being the other part that's actually a continuation of himself, and what I wanted to talk about also, was about the way Batman uses his strength, because we know he's a multimillionaire and he has all this technology that, if you really think about it, is created to destroy, just as his fists are created or were trained to physically, take down enemies. And that's the other important part of Batman. And the Joker, plays psychologically in this scene, particularly on, let's look at the scene. Yeah, from this part onwards, and then that's the rule you have to break to know the truth, about death and Batman killing, because Batman has that specific rule not to kill. I mean, he can't punch any guy to any, physical condition, critical point, but not kill. And the reason why I think the Joker completes this image of Batman is connected also between in this scene where you have nothing to threaten me with, nothing to do with all your strength. And Batman is created in such a way, he went and trained with all this particular league to kind of fight injustice and so forth. And then he finds this, character who actually tells him, like, you can be as strong as you want, but that's not what you need in order to look for justice. And what I wanted to get, the point that I wanted to get across is that we see how, I'm not saying you specifically, but some of you value these aspects of cruelty within justice. And we see it even in the police, for example. How do they just use, physical violence as part of the justice apparatus? And how is it that is, represented to particular characters that most of us love and appreciate, or some of us love and appreciate. And the next part that I wanted to continue and to point out is, in this scene where in the movie Batman and Superman, we can see actually how, Clark Kent even plays around with this idea.
Clark Kent, Daily Planet. Oh, my foundation has already issued a statement in support of books. So, wow, pretty girl, bad habit. Don't quote me, all right?
What's your position on the Bat Vigilante in Gotham?
Daily Planet. Wait, do I own this one? Or is that the other guy?
Civil liberties are being trampled on in your city. Good people living in fear.
Don't believe everything you hear, son.
I've seen it, Mr. Wayne. He thinks he's above the law.
The Daily Planet criticizing those who think they're above the law is a little hypocritical. What'd you say?
And what I wanted to point out was, this idea of, how Batman even believes that he can be, above the law, and having all of these technological innovations hidden from everyone, because he believes that everyone can be corrupted, but not himself, right? I mean, he can get to that point and so forth. And the last point that I wanted to get across was, I wanted to take you into a journey of how we ennoble, how we create these characters that, if we look at the cultural level, we value them. We value and approve and normalize this search of justice / vengeance, because they're really connected. And you need to keep on connecting vengeance with physical violence and this psychological grief that Batman, translates into someone. into someone else, into some other aspects, whilst accepting these law trespassing and violent acts. And I think that the other aspect that needs to be connected with is how is it that, for instance, in the case of Catwoman, or even we can, look at others, for example, Superwoman. We can look at, what was her name? The other DC hero. Marvelous. I don't recall her name, but most of these characters are kind of associated the woman character with nature, and in this context, I found this quote to be rather interesting, because they kind of they keep on making this connection between woman, just as the environment, as being that which happens in the background, and also not not being that part of, not connected to reason in some cultures, but also a resource empty of its own purpose or meanings, and hence available or to be annexed for the purposes of those supposedly identified with reason or intellect, which basically means is, how some people treat women as being empty, without purpose, of having a specific role, and just because they are the reasonable ones in the relationship. And that's one of the things that we also see in nature. Now, think about, for example, animals. We never come to think about, okay, what's their own purpose in their own place, right? We think about domestication. We see a dog and we're like, oh, he's so cute, they want to have it. And then you kind of appropriate his own life because you are the reasonable one, unlike him. And the same thing happens with, for example, natural resources. And maybe this is why notions such as the Pachamama, which is the idea of nature being actually an individual who is represented in the legal apparatus, is really hard for us to envision, because we don't see nature as being reasonable, as being someone like us who can put words into arguments. And that's the other connection, that it's really important that we connect with nature. And it's not only that, that is something that has happened recently. This idea of nature being for others, just like some people think of woman, can even be seen in philosophical writings. For example, Pico de Mirandola, he was an Italian philosopher, but mostly he was a theologian. And he, takes this mythology of our cosmos creation, and then how God put us at the center of the universe and according to our own free will. But at the same time, it is stated that we were put at the center of the universe in such a way that it would be easier for us to dominate our environments. And that's the other important aspect, to see how have we worked historically with these notions of the environment as being something that needs to be dominated, or that it was created for us. And how is it that we even normalize this idea that nature is something as exploitable as the proletariat and some other instances that have been developing in history. But also, I think we even miss some of these other elements. For example, in Descartes, in his philosophy, when he's talking about nature and so forth, he actually argues that living things are nothing more than inert matter organized in a complex way. Only the human being has a substantial soul distinct from the body, making it only respectable species. The rest of nature, living or inert, is part of the world of objects at humanity's disposal. And this is part of the modern, ideology, the idea that we have to dominate nature because it was created for ourselves, because that's their only purpose, and we're the reasonable ones, unlike nature. But what happens when we go against climate change? It seems that, our own planet has its own logic, and at the same time that is putting us in this particular place where our natural resources consumption, and the way that we produce is actually at the conflict place regarding us and planet Earth. Now, the second part that I wanted to get across has, I think that, and that I found really fascinating is, I mean, you can look the whole conference from this philosopher. I think she's really interesting, you know, to hear from, and we're gonna be looking at some specific timestamps of this class. So let us begin with the first part.
She asks, right? How did this become about guys? She's very interested. She says, you know, when we think of the land.
She's talking about landscape photography. Like the first thing that we think about landscape photography is obviously Nat Geo and this sort of, you know, activities or enterprises or businesses that dedicate themselves to photography. But I think this idea is you know, rather interesting. Why is it that whenever we think about landscape photography, we immediately associate guys? I mean, if you do a quick Google search, even right now, landscape photography or Nat Geo photography, you're gonna see some women, yes, but you're gonna also see mostly men, and not only men, but men in risky situations. And she develops an argument in relation to that, which I found really fascinating.
How did this become about guys? She's very interested. She says, you know, when we think of the landscape photographer, this is the guy we imagine. Think about it, the National Geographic photographer, right? He's kind of a Marlboro man, kind of sexy, right? He's had all kinds of adventures. Yeah, he's been everywhere. He's seen, oh, you can't imagine what he's seen, right? That, you know, he has muscles, right? Because that camera is heavy. He's got to carry that heavy, he's got to carry this thing, right? And he goes to these remote, rugged, difficult places, extreme situations, extreme climates, and he gets that perfect shot, right? That person, Bright says, is always imagined as a man, right? Not by accident. It's not because they happen to mostly be guys, right? So I'll put up this quote here, right? The image of the lone white male photographer, like his prototypes, the great white hunter and explorer who ventures into the wild to capture a virgin nature, capital V, capital N, endures, even if updated stylistically and technically. And then she's giving us a kind of a list, right, of I believe, American landscape photographers, the greats, the 20th century greats, right? Muybridge, Watkins, O'Sullivan, Strand, Weston, Adams, Porter, Campiongro, Clift, Gowan, Klett, Mizrak. The list goes on. Where are the women? Okay, so we've got, once again, the guy in the extreme situation, in the extreme climate and terrain. Okay, so how did this come to be? As the wilderness fantasy was built, as we have seen, one of the cornerstones was the rejection of domesticity, right? This idea that the domestic sphere was something that made you soft. I mean, this is as far away from home as you can get. This is real life, right? Taking out the garbage, peeling the potatoes, not so sexy, right?
The point that she is trying to make with this, and it was stated also a little bit before, like she's working with the idea of how even some campaigns, you know, are trying to connect the wildness, you know, nature with this idea of a man, that you know, what is a man supposed to be. And this is also an image that we can see in certain states developing and constructing in different ways. But I think that we can see this, for example, in Texas, how they think about ranches and how it's an activity allegedly for men and so forth. But I wanted also to show you that if you look into, if you do some quick Google searches, this is what you find with, looking for Nat Geo risky situations. This is all men. There's no woman in here. I only found one photo of a woman where she was just, with the water up right to her neck. That was the risky situation. And I think there was even a guy who passed out because of a risky situation. And I found this, aspects fascinating, but she's gonna keep on, making an argument, and let's keep on looking at it.
Here's our Marlboro Man again. I just like these ads so much. Come to Marlboro country. Right? It's not even smoke this cigarette, right? Buy this object. It's come here, come to this place. Come to this animal, to this experience, right? Animals, guys, perfect. And Bright says, right, we just saw this. I'm just pulling it out here. Men choose to act upon nature and bend it to their will, while women simply are nature and cannot separate themselves from it. So men can do things to nature, women cannot, right? And so, of course, I couldn't resist throwing this in there. What's happening here? I only found this because I happened to Google Marlboro Man. And look at the delight, right? She wasn't looking for a hero, but he became her knight in a black Stetson, which I think is a hat, right? So again, men can act upon nature. Guess whose is the nature, right? While women simply are the nature and they are acted upon. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of sort of feminist critique of landscape, right? That lets us go into some ecofeminist territory, because we could also call it feminist critique of wilderness.
All right, so that's the part in regard the idea of wilderness, and how can we, like she says, create this critique of feminism within the idea of the wild. And the other argument that she's gonna be constructing has to do with how this gender construction even is closely associated with food. Like guys, whenever you think about carnes asadas, do you see women cooking? Like, just do a quick Google search, and if you look into carne asada festivales, there are almost no woman in those spaces. Why is that? Have you ever thought about this? Well, this is because we are under a gender construction that supposedly, has this place, carnes asadas, being an activity for men. That is not to say that women don't like to eat carne asada, but the activity itself, the act of cooking it, of preparing it, that's where some men feel, their manliness, to put it in some other way. Manhood is constructed in our culture in part by access to meat eating and control of other bodies. Now, this idea of meat eating, we're gonna go a little bit further with it, and how can it also be seen as some kind of a psychological construction, or how do we process the idea of butchering, which is having an object and then seeing it as different pieces. So let's keep on looking at a little bit more on these arguments.
tender, juicy beef. What's your cut, right? Here we see tattoo, barbecue, sexy pig, right? She's flirting with you. She has really nice lips, and she has tattoos and panties. Great curves, right? But also things like this, right? This also is. These are also examples from her website, from Carol Adams's website. I don't know if you can see what's going on here, right? But notice what it says up there. Cut a lemon in half and place it under turkey skin to lighten the mood this Thanksgiving. And when Adams writes about the way that her book was received, when she first wrote her book, what a lot of people wrote in response was, it's too bad Carol Adams has no sense of humor, right? Sense of humor. These are just jokes. They're funny. This was the response. This is funny, guys. Come on. This, the turkey with the boobs, fantastic. Funny, right? Or this, it'll blow your mind away. Super 7-incher, right? What's going on here? I don't know, but we can have some ideas about what's going on here, right?
And now I ask you guys, why do you think people take these images as being funny? Or to put it in another way, why should we, instead of feeling grossed out, think that these images are funny? Or why do they associate funny with these ideas? What do you guys think? And not only that, we can even see it. Let's go back to this fragment and question ourselves, why was this scene added?
Pretty girl, bad habit. Don't quote me, all right? What's your position?
Why does he need to make that statement? Oh, pretty girl. Don't.
What's your position?
Why do you think that it's so necessary, to insert that as something rather funny? Well, let's look a little bit further into it.
That when we just talk about human-animal, what gets lost there is that those animals are male and female too. That those humans are male and female too. Right? And that those beings are then positioned against each other in complicated, right, different ways. Think about the fact that all of the, when we say something like, well, we shouldn't give bovine growth hormone to cows. There's a whole problem of the ethics around, right, giving these growth hormones to cows to make them produce more milk. But we're not just talking about cows, Adams will say. We are talking about female cows. That's who we're talking about. And that changes things. It changes how the animal is imagined. It changes how we imagine our duties to it. Okay? Patriarchy is a gender system that is implicit in human-animal relationships. I want to give you some of the examples from her book.
All right. Here, what I wanted, to focus on and sort of, give you the answer on why are these images, being thought of by some people as funny, has to do with this idea of an absent referent. And this idea is also connected even with the idea of eating. And we'll look into it a little bit further. So what happens with the previous images that we saw? So we're looking at parts of a body, right? And the reason why some find it funny is because, look, it's a part of a woman into something else that isn't a woman. And what they want us to think about these ecofeminism theories is that act itself, taking a part of the woman and think of it as not being a human being, and that happens exactly the same when we are eating. Now, please tell me that whether I'm mistaken or not, but when you eat, for example, a turkey leg in Christmas, when you eat, for example, some chicken, some part, the breast, the legs, whatever, the drum rolls and so forth, or even wings, which is a really cultural, popular, food, right? You're not thinking about the animal itself. Now, imagine yourselves, sitting, eating chicken whilst thinking about a chicken. Does that gross you out? Like, do you feel nauseous? If you had exactly, if you had to kill the animals in order to eat, then you would be a vegetarian. Why do you think that is? You cannot kill anything. Okay. I also think that it has to do with, maybe not in your case, but particularly when we eat, we remove the idea of eating an animal. We are eating meat. We are eating food. And the difference between eating food and eating a chicken, that's the difference that matters. And that happens, the same way within patriarchy, when men think, at their, at female body parts. It's the same psychological apparatus, the same practice. And this is what they mean with the absent referent. This idea that we can separate the meat, just as in animals, just as in the female body, and then think of it of something else that it's not an animal or a human being. And this is why ecofeminism argues that the patriarchy is a gender system that is implicit within human and animal relationships. It has to do with some of these psychological logics that is within it. So what I wanted to kind of, have or closure part of the class is, think of butchering, and butchering is, this idea of cutting something into pieces, but specifically on focusing on one part of the body of something in order to forget that they, whether an animal, a person, being a man, a woman, whatever, are something other than it. And that's what they want us to think about. And if we think about it, for example, in carne asadas, like I was talking previously, we don't really think that we are eating a specific kind of animal, and it grosses us out because of this idea that we are, beyond this point of wildness. But I've also seen memes that connect this argument. Only real men eat raw food. And when you think about carne asadas, and those of you who know a little bit into it, you know that there are different ways to prepare the meat. Like you can have it fully cooked, tres cuartos, medio, término medio, and all those, food languages. And there is, I remember this meme, but I couldn't find it, that made this argument. Only real men eat raw food, and you had the meat that it was just had blood all over the place, and it didn't look, cooked. Or these sort of memes. And why is it that we find it funny? And specifically, why do you think that this meme had to be used here? Why that guy? Why a guy that for some reason is associated in the meme culture as manhood. This connection of man and meat. Or for example, this guy. Why do you think this guy had to go to a vegan event and started to do this? I mean, it's all part of the same logic that men are supposed to, so forth, and even the idea of veganism for some men who are constructed within this gender role construction, the idea of stopping to eat meat is something that it just doesn't compaginate. It just doesn't match with their logic. And you can even find this in your own Facebook group, Mercado Libros Tech. I'm pretty sure that you guys have seen the debate of the vegan guy and the guy who argues that whenever this guy comes in and publishes something about veganism, I'm going to make a carne asada. So this happens even before, in front of our eyes. So, all right, let's kind of, wrap up our class. And let's try to go back to these ideas of how have women been infantilized, satisfied, and subjugated by patriarchal capitalism. And what I wanted to focus on this slide was specifically what's the role of Jane in the movie of Tarzan? Because in the movie, she had this questioning. She wanted to be a researcher, a scientist, just as her father. But then in the movie, she happens to be the one that gives strength to give some kind of a life-giving force, which in this case was, helping Tarzan to kind of go into civilization a little bit, give him that aspect that he didn't have that was connected to it. And that way, she was reduced her role, as being that of a lover, of being of that of someone who gives him a particular strength and force. But that also happens with the counterpart, with Gala. You will always be in my heart, right? The mother, the image, the figure who had the only role of being a mother, and we couldn't see Gala as something other than it, just as a reproductive and passive role. So it is important that we keep on questioning this relationship between feminism and climate change, because when you look at numbers, when you look at important information, you find these arguments. 70% of the 1.3 billion people living in condition of poverty are women. In urban areas, 40% of the poorest households are headed by women. Women predominate in the world's food production, but they own less than 10% of the land. One study found female representation in national parliaments across 91 countries correlates with more stringent climate change policies and lower carbon emissions. This reinforces evidence that gender equality improves societal outcomes in relation to the environment and peace building efforts. Now, I found this information really important, because we tend to make even these kind of arguments that this is the reason why we need women in politics, because they are the ones who are going to save us from the climate catastrophe. Or even in politics, we need more women in the parliament, we need more women being represented. But what if it's not necessary that we need women, but what if the thing we need is actually to break away from these gender notions and act upon climate change? That is a question that I want you guys to think, as a consequence of this class. And well, it was the topics that we covered today, and I hope you like the class, guys. So that would be all for today. Yeah, well, I mean, you can leave, you can, have this time to think about it, or if you have any other homework or activities, we'll see each other next class. But really, guys, I guys particularly, but also, of course, you women, think about these important aspects. These are not just random stuff. This is something that has been studied for quite a long time. And it is important that, we keep on making a better place for ourselves. So take care and have a good day.